Okay, so what I'm going to discuss with you is again a very important process which is associated with your research career. But this topic of today basically is a common experience, which each one of you had experienced, learned, and that is communicating. You see, from childhood to now, or as long one is alive, he or she communicates with people surrounding him or her. So you would have experienced that some people are good in communicating and some people are not so good in communication skills, you know, which they differentiate themselves from others. Those who are good communicators, they become uh, popular among their surroundings, and those who are not so good communicators, they remain in the audience to listen to people who can communicate with people. So it is a skill, But having said this, communication is a very, very common factor which everybody uses, to communicate with others. So what I'm going to do in couple of lectures is to understand with you what is this communication I'm referring to, what actually it means. I mean, you would have had your own um, uh, learning process about communication, but then I will try to put things in a systematic way and take you to um, take you to the uh, in a direction where I intend to take you. That is communication uh, at your workplace, communication related to your scientific discoveries and the knowledge you generate. You know, so basically, when we talk of communication or process of communication, uh, it differentiates itself into so many subheadings, like communication skills. First, we will look at the communication skill. Uh, I will be talking about a little bit on definition, process of communication, level of communication, flow of communication, communication network, and importance of technical communication towards the end. So these are the points which I will be touching with you in a couple of lectures from today. So starting with uh, how one defines communication. What is communication actually? As I told you, all of you communicate from morning till night you sleep. But then, if I ask you, how what is the definition of communication? Can anybody define what is communication? Quickly, if you want to respond to this. Any taker for this? These topics are very, very general topics, so it's better you uh, involve yourselves and try to learn with me, So,
Sir,
so
communication is like interaction with other people, like how we tell what we think to other people, like in the form of writing or in the form of speech.
very good. You are on the right track, basically.
Sir, it
Uh,
is a way of making someone understand our own thought.
yes, yes, yes.
Exchange information.
What's that?
Exchange information.
Okay. So basically, you have touched upon um, the various points. I mean, which was, for example, it is one definition basically, which I've tried to put, that communication is a process or activity of expressing ideas, feelings, or giving people information or instructions, you know. So basically, communication involves two people, or one is the one who is expressing, and the one another one who is receiving, you know. So there is a sender of messages and another is receiver of the messages, in other words. So communication, we take it as a process or activity of expressing ideas, feelings, or giving information and instructions. So all those things which two or three of you expressed has come in this definition, basically. So that is one part of it, that uh, you should have ideas to communicate, you should have feelings to communicate, you should have information to communicate, and you should have something in terms of instructions to give people, you know. So a communicator should have these things, you know. If you don't have ideas, you cannot communicate. If you don't have feelings, you cannot communicate. If you don't have information, you cannot communicate. Or if you have nothing to give instructions, you cannot instruct people. Okay. So if you want to be a communicator, you should have these things with you. And then the question is how you communicate. I'll come to that later. Okay. So we are initiating a process, uh, I mean, communication as a process or activity to deliver ideas, feelings, information, and instructions. Okay. Now, how to get these? The next is how one uh, get the ideas or the feelings. So it comes through experiences, you know. We have five senses which gives us these experiences which we accumulate and gather information, and then we try to transmit that information. For example, by hearing, by smelling, by seeing, by taste, or by touch. So these are our five senses which we utilize to gain access to the information. If you are reading, you are collecting information. If you are hearing, you are collecting information. And if you are smelling, that kind of information comes, taste, touch, you know. So all these senses help us in accumulating lot of information, you know. And then the question of communicating it to others. I mean, the first part is how you gather information, how you get material which you need to communicate with others, or which you communicate generally with others. Okay. So basically, communication skills, what it refers, you know, skill is the ability, you know. One is I defined communication. What is communication? It is the expression of feelings, information, blah, blah. Now, how you express that information or feelings, that is the part of communication skills. And that is the ability to use language and express information. So again, here, uh, we are talking about uh, a language which communicator is using has to be receptive and expressive. Means it should be able to or uh, uh, the communicator should be able to make the receivers understand what he or she wants to communicate. So the language which he is using or she is using should be received well by the audience or by the one who is receiving the information, and it should be expressive. Means the language should be um, the recipient should be able to understand the language, and also it should be expressive, you know. So communication skills deal with both the kind of language you are using and how expressive you are while communicating with the recipients. Okay, and that's where I told in the beginning that people get differentiated from each other just by the way they communicate. You know, some of you are good communicators, you make friends easily, you can make yourself understood to others, whereas there is other type of uh, people or classmates in you uh, who are not very expressive, but they have everything, they have all the information, they have feelings, they have information, but uh, they will say something and people will understand something else. I think you would have experienced by now in your life that this is what happens. Those who are not able to communicate better, uh, they don't have many friends. They make enemies very fast, you know. Though they are not intending to do so, but it happens naturally. Okay, so communication skill is very, very important part, you know. I'm taking you from personal to professional, you know, and these things do apply in professional communications as well. You know, you should have something to communicate. You know, if you are a teacher, you should be able, you should have material to teach to students. You should use such a language that students should understand what you want to say, you know. So you should be good communicator. A good teacher is always a good communicator, you know, who can make the students understand a complex phenomenon also easily. Okay, and those are the teachers who are respected by students, you know, those who communicate better. And I'm sure you would have seen teachers who are not good communicators. They are not good teachers. They will, you just say, okay, this fellow has come and you'll finish his class and go, and you will read yourself whatever things you have not understood. So even teaching as a profession, I mean, depends on how good communicator you are. So these 2-3 lectures probably might help you in refining and defining. If you take whatever points I'm going to put forth, that you can evaluate yourself how good communicator you are and whether you need to improve any of the skills, you know, which are required to be a good communicator. So please follow this, whatever we are discussing, quite, critically, and self-evaluate yourself on these parameters. Okay. Now, so after in defining communication and what matters in communication is the skills. Okay. Now, next is what is the goal? You know, what actually one wants to achieve by communicating, you know. So when we communicate with others, whether to one person or to group of persons, what actually one is intending to achieve. For example, the communicator may want to achieve a change in behavior or to get some action done by the receivers or to ensure understanding. If he's a teacher, he's teaching like I'm teaching you, and my goal is that you understand what I'm trying to make you understand. Okay, so that's my goal, or that every teacher's goal remains in a class, that he when he's communicating, when he's teaching you, he's communicating you the knowledge, or a bundle of knowledge which he or she uh, wants you to understand, or you or the communicator may like to persuade you to do things which you are not doing, and another goal can be to get and give information. Means he's giving you information, he wants something back also. So to summarize what I'm trying to uh, uh, what I'm trying to uh, communicate here is that these are broadly some of the goals of a communicator which he or she wants to achieve, either to bring change in your behavior or get action done, ensure understanding, or to persuade you. You means the receiver of the communication, or to get or give information. So these are some of the goals of a communicator. You know. Now, how many ways are there to communicate? Some of you told, one of you hinted in the when we were trying to define. So uh, there is verbal communication by speaking, like I am doing. I'm speaking to you. Another way is by writing. You can communicate by writing also, through emails, through notes. That is another way of communication. There can be visual images. Through visual images also you can communicate, or by body language. Certain things are done by body gestures. So you do some gesture, and that gesture means something which the recipients know. I mean, the recipient has to know what that gesture means. So either they learn by experiences, or you tell in advance that if I'm doing this, that's how the signal language, signal languages developed, sign languages. So that is another. So these are some of the ways, common ways by which we communicate among each other, by speaking, by writing, by visual images, or by body language. And then types of communication. Now, I will be a little bit take you towards sort of organizational communication setup. What happened, and that applies to general life as well. So in an organization, the communication can be a formal or informal. And this is very much in interpersonal communications also. With some people you are very formal. You have to take care of protocols and the language which we are using for communication. So that is formal communication. Informal, where you take liberties. You don't mind using informal language to communicate, to tell, yourself, or that what you want them to receive from you as information. So the communication can be formal or informal. Now, flow of information. It can be vertical, it can be horizontal, it can be cross, in an organization. I will come to that part later, but you try to understand this, that a flow of information can be from top to bottom, that is vertical, from one end to another end, that is horizontal, or it can be one end to another cross. Among the people, if there is a strata organization, say in a university, you have vice chancellor or registrar, and then you have deans of the school, then you have heads of the department, and then you have the faculty, for example, and then you have the students. Okay, so the information can flow from registrar to students through this, like this, So I just gave you an example. So flow of the communication can be either vertical, horizontal, or cross. Okay, and on the basis of expression, it can be oral, written, and gesture. I mean, the same thing which I referred earlier, that it can be oral communication, it can be written communication, or it can be through gestures. Okay. And there are some barriers in communication when we talk about the communication in an organization. And of course, it also holds true for societal communications also, one-to-one communication in family, within families, semantic barriers, emotional or psychological barriers, organizational barriers, and barriers in superiors and things like that. For example, what I'm referring to, organizational barriers, where the communication can be hampered, is the organizational policy. That the organizational policy is such, for example, that you cannot communicate to public as to what is going on in that organization. So there is a barrier that by rules and laws, that you are not free to communicate to public outside the organization. So there is a person designated who can communicate. Not everybody can communicate outside. I'm just giving you one example, and this is true for all organizations globally, that not everyone can communicate, though they may have information, but they are not entitled to. And if they do so, they are liable to be punished as per the rules and regulations of that organization. Then personal barriers are there. I mean, if you have a superior in an organization, then you have to be careful in communicating with your superiors or elders in your family. So you have to be formal with your elders and with your superior in an organization. Okay. If you can't take liberties until unless you are given. There are certain superiors who treat their colleagues equal, and you, in that scenario, you can informally also talk to your superiors. You can communicate with them informally. But then, wherever there is, if there is a superior who expects you to behave with him in a particular manner, then you have to be very, very formal. So, I mean, these are some of the things which one has to keep in mind while communicating in society, that if you're talking to an elderly person, then you have to use a much refined language to communicate. And the same thing holds true for an organization also, Now, coming to communication as a process, as I think by now you would have understood, and which is becoming very clear in this also, that in communication process, there is two sets of people. One is the sender, which sends the communication, and another is the receiver, which receives the communication. And the sender uses a channel or medium for, um, for transmitting the, the message to receiver, so it goes. Then what happens if the sender is expecting a feedback? In that case, what happens? The receiver becomes the sender and the sender becomes receiver. So it's a reverse process. So now it is the receiver which is sending a communication and the receiver is getting the communication. So this is what basically the process of communication is all about. So you have the sender sends the message to receiver and receiver sends back the feedback to the sender. Okay, so it is flexible. At some time you are sender, then you become receiver when you get the feedback, from the receiver. And then if there is a issue with the transmitting channel and there is a noise, in that case, your message doesn't get transmitted and these messages get back to the senders actually. Okay, so this channel has to be very good for transmitting the communication of the message. So three components: the verbal message, paraverbal message. The communication I'm talking about has three components. The words we choose, that is verbal messages. Paraverbal messages, how we say the words. How you use that word in the sentence, which changes the meaning. And then the non-verbal messages, our body language. So these three components are used to send clear, concise messages and receive and correctly understand messages sent to us. So these three components of the communication, like either the verbal message or paraverbal message and the non-verbal messages, are the key basically, which to send the messages and they receive the feedback basically. So when you are receiving, there is I've given a lot of emphasis on the communication, but receiving message is also equally important. Now, for example, I am teaching you, I am sending you communication, you are receiving. Now, this receiving is also a very, very important component in communication. So you have to listen very carefully, which requires energy and a psychological connection with the speaker. Okay. And then the receiver should have a willingness to learn from the sender, whatever is being sent to him, So in communication, it's a two-way process, sender and receiver. Sender has to be very clear what he wants to send or she wants to send. And the receivers also has to be very, very attentive to receive. If you are reading a written message, you have to read it carefully and understand. If you are listening, then you have to listen very carefully and comprehend the message, And then when there are two people communicating with each other, there has to be willingness and desire. If you are communicating, you should be willing to communicate what you want. And if you are receiving, a communication, you should be able to receive the communications. Then it is where how you develop communication skills and explore the related skills. So basically, you have oral communication, written communication, and the non-verbal communication. These are the three communication processes or mediums we use. And all the three mediums either oral, written, or non-verbal. For example, oral communication is a presentation where there is an audience, who are critically listening. So your contents, and I will come to this later towards the end of this unit, how to make presentations, So oral is in the form of presentations, and how the presentation can be effective. We will talk about that later. If it is coming to written communication, it deals with the information you generate. You write scientific papers, so you should be able to write very clearly what the message is. You should read it time and again and edit it, and so that whatever you're writing becomes effective in communicating. We'll talk this also towards the end, and then the non-verbal communication. So basically, we need to focus on these three communication skills within ourselves, and I'm going to talk one by one about this, how one can you can say how to be a good communication skills. That is when you are talking into an audience where, or even a class or even one-to-one, that there has to be eye contact between the communicator, within you and the audience. And then you should use gestures, expressions of what you want audience to understand. So that body language has to be good, and then you should be able to convey your thoughts, and then these things come with practice, actually. So you have to do a lot of practice for sharpening your communication skills. That's very, very important. Okay, so to conclude, what I'm trying to what I have tried to do is to make you understand that effective communication, it's a two-way process, basically. Involves active listening. So one is giving information, another is receiving, so it is, if it is a two-way process involving two sets of people, then both are accountable. The one who is speaking and the one who is listening, and feedback is always important for in the process of communication, so it should be free of stress. Means the communication, you should not be under any stress, and communication should be very clear. So I will stop with this note here, and we'll meet tomorrow,